It's Jody with All About the Harvest, where I teach you how to grow, use, and preserve your harvest. And today I'm coming at you with a recipe called Taffy Apple Salad. Now this is one of my favorite recipes. I have been making this for years, and I typically make this in the fall when the apple harvest season is abundant, but this fall I was not able to do that. So now that I'm doing the pantry challenge, I'm working on cleaning out my refrigerator, cleaning out my freezers, and this recipe works with both. If you don't know what the pantry challenge is, I will link my pantry challenge playlist up above. It is currently January 19th, and the pantry challenge usually starts the 1st of January and it goes to the end of February. You are trying to use up the food you have in your home before going to the grocery store. So you're going to use things from your fridge, your freezer, your pantry. If you're a canner or a freeze dryer, you're going to use those type of things. So this particular recipe is perfect because I am trying to use up a lot of my food from my fridge and my freezer, and this also gets some things out of my canning pantry as well. So let me tell you what is in this recipe, and then I'll show you how to make it. Now this recipe I got years ago in one of these little flyers. This recipe is a winning recipe in the 1999 Wisconsin Apple Recipe Contest. The Wisconsin Apple Growers Association put this out, and so this is where it was. And there's a few other recipes in here. You can see this is a little bit beat up because I use it for this recipe, and I absolutely love it. It's on the very last page. It's called Taffy Apple Salad. Let me tell you what is in it. So it is 6 cups of chopped apples with the peelings on. Now they said chopped unpared apples. I had to look it up when I first made this recipe. That means with the peelings on. Then it's 8 ounces of crushed pineapple, drained, and then you're going to reserve the juice. Now for this recipe, I am going to use my own home canned pineapple. This is a 10-ounce jar. This is a different size jar. It's a little bit bigger than the 8-ounce jar, and if you can kind of see, hopefully you can kind of see, it looks like a little bit of a football shape. This is a 10-ounce jar, and I use this, and this is fine. I've also used the 8-ounce jars. Now as you can tell, this isn't crushed pineapples. This is like pineapple chunks. So what I do for this recipe is I will actually take an immersion blender and I will just run it. I'll dump this into something else, and then I'll run the immersion blender in there, and then that makes it crushed. And then you do want to save the pineapple juice because you will use that in the first part of making this recipe. For now, I'm just telling you what the ingredients are. So again, those 6 cups of chopped apples, which I found is about 6 to 8 apples depending upon the kind of apples that you get. Your crushed pineapple, you're gonna have 1 egg. You're going to use 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. Typically I use apple cider vinegar, but I do make my own apple cider vinegar and my own pear vinegar, some other vinegars as well. But I have a lot of pear vinegar left, so I'm gonna use pear vinegar in there because I have a bunch of it. But if you have apple cider vinegar, go ahead and use that. You're going to use 1/2 cup of sugar, 1 tablespoon of flour. You're going to use 2 cups of salted peanuts. I usually go with something like this. You don't have to get the name brand. You can get anyone. And then 8 ounces of whipped topping. So for the 8-ounce container of whipped topping, they're just talking about something like this. As I've been making this more and more, I've been deciding to use the extra creamy, which is a little bit thicker. And I've also found that you don't necessarily have to use an entire container. So if you have a container like this that is partially used, say from some pies or something, you can use this. I do have another one that is unopened, but I'm going to use this up first and see if this is enough. So that's it for ingredients. Let me show you how to make it. So for the first step, it says combine pineapple juice, sugar, flour, apple cider vinegar, and egg, blending well. So I'm just gonna do it right in the pan that I'm gonna heat everything up on the stove. Here's the egg. I wanna do that first in case I get some eggshells in there, I can see it. Now I personally save my eggshells, so I'm gonna rinse this out and I will dry that for my plants. Okay, I went over there and washed my hands. I guess I'll just beat that a little bit so that it is beaten in there perfect. And then I am going to add the next ingredient, which is 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. Again, I'm going to use my pear vinegar. Let me go ahead and do that. So 2 tablespoons. I have one of these really cool shot glasses that has different measurements on it. And for tablespoons, the tablespoons is right up here. So I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, so I got the 2 tablespoons of the vinegar. Let me just stir that. I'm going to do 1/2 a cup of sugar. So just do that. And then I need 1 tablespoon of flour. So I have this just to grab that 1 tablespoon of flour. Let me kind of get this out of the way here. There we go. Okay. 1 tablespoon of flour. Close that up. I need to add the pineapple juice. I'm going to just stir this a little bit. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Okay. Now, for this, again, my home canned pineapple, I really recommend using these. It doesn't wreck your lids, and it's just a nice bottle opener. So I'll link it in the description below. Now, on these, it says to reserve the juice. So what I'm going to do, you could just kind of pour it off and hope you don't get any pineapple in it, but I'm going to just use this lid here. It's like a little strainer lid, and do that. And that's perfect. I'm going to wash my hands real quick. Okay, so now I'm going to stir that up, and then what we need to do is we need to cook this, stirring until thick. And then you need to cool it completely. So you want to do this step first. So now that it's stirred up, I'm going to go ahead and put it over on this stove and get it cooking, and I'll show you how that looks. Okay, so I just got it on the stove here, and I have it about a medium. Go ahead and stir it. It's going to take a little bit for it to get warmed up. I will show you the process as we kind of do it. You'll see this is going to get thick. I'll show you that. All right, you might be able to see it starting to kind of get warmer, starting to bubble a little bit. You want to make sure that you're watching this and you're stirring it, and you can kind of see it's starting to thicken, and it's going to have this look, this color to it, but it will be thicker. And so I'm just going to go ahead and keep doing that. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. I'm going to turn this off. And I have been stirring it while I was off camera. I've just been kind of standing here watching it. So you for sure want to take it off of the heat here so it can cool. Now I'm going to give you a little tip. Because this has to cool, you can do a couple options. You could, just set it, say, on another burner that it wasn't on. You could pour this into a bowl and put it in your fridge or freezer if you want to use it right away. So when I make this, I usually use a big Pyrex glass container, depending upon how much you will have. I usually use this because it's big enough and I can stir everything around without it falling out. This is a big 4-quart one, but you could probably fit it in a smaller one. I could just take this, put it in here, put this in the fridge to get it cooling while I'm doing the rest of the prep. Now the other option you have, I have done this once. I made a double batch of this, and then I took half of it and I put it in a container and I froze it to use at a later date, and that worked just fine. So that's something you could do, especially if, say, you don't have an 8-ounce can of crushed pineapple and say you have more of a 15 or 16-ounce can, then you could just double this recipe and then you just freeze half of it. So I have done that. That was before I started canning my own pineapple, and that is what I did, and it did work just fine to have this in the freezer. So to make this a little quicker for the video, I did decide I'm going to put it right in this bowl and put it in the fridge. The other thing you want to make sure you do at this point, if you haven't already, is take your Cool Whip out of the freezer. And if you're making it right away like I am, then take it out and get it on your counter. But if you thought of it ahead of time, or if you're going to let this actually sit, say, for the half an hour or whatever to cool, then you could just take it out and put it right in your fridge. But I'm going to try to make this sooner rather than later. So I'm going to put this in the fridge, and I just took out my Cool Whip. Hopefully that'll be thawed by the time I need to use it. Okay, so while that is cooling, I am going to use my immersion blender to make this into crushed pineapples. So now I have the KitchenAid immersion blender, and my KitchenAid immersion blender came with this awesome container that you can blend things in. And because this isn't going to fit in here, because this is a small mouth, I am going to dump it into the KitchenAid container. So let me just plug that in here. Take this off. It's kind of nice. It has a little rubber bottom so your stuff doesn't go flying everywhere. Now this one has 2 different speeds. I'm going to go with one, the lower speed, and I'll try to get this so you can see it. I think you can see that. Looks like crushed pineapple to me. So I'll go ahead and clean this off, and then the next step, we're going to need to cut up the apples. So I'll clean them up and cut them up, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, so I washed my apples, and I do have to, cut off a couple little parts that I don't like. But one of the first things that I will do, I will take this. This is an apple corer. I got it from Pampered Chef years ago. I love it. This locks it down if you go that way to keep it safe when you're storing it. I usually never do that. But what you're going to do, just take one of these and show you if you don't have one. So you basically just take this, you're going to go right down the center, and then I lift it up, and then I go like that. And that is how you get the majority. Now we'll have to deal with the seeds inside there, and then you just take this, and then you shoot it out. Put it in your worm compost or whatever. That's probably what I'll do with them. So that is how I start this process. So I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm sure you all know how to cut apples. I cut them into manageable pieces for me, maybe 1/2 inch chunks to 1 inch. Depending. It depends on who's eating it. Are you giving it to little kids? You're probably going to want smaller pieces. So you do what you see fit. And here's the thing. If this doesn't make 6 cups, if it makes 5 cups, or it makes 7 cups, I'm just going to use all these apples up. So it could be a little bit less. It could be a little bit more. I do have another apple that has a pretty big kind of bruise in it. So I got to cut that off as well. I'm going to keep doing this, and then I will come back when these are done, and then you can see the next steps. So as you can see, I added some of the apples into that bowl. The bottom still has that, you can kind of see there, that sauce that we made, and I have more apples. So my apples ended up making 9 cups, which is basically like a batch and a half of this recipe. That being said, this is just going to be a little apple heavy, which is okay. Apples are good for you. Let me go ahead, and next I'm going to add this, which was that pineapple that we crushed up, the immersion blender. Now, because I have so many apples, we'll just taste test it. We might need to add more nuts or more whipped cream. We'll just see. And then it calls for 2 cups of these salted peanuts. And I wanted to use this up. It's just under 2 cups. I do have a small open package that we got just last month when we were in Cancun. Our resort had this, so I'm going to just throw those in there. It's basically just at 2 cups. I do have more if I need to add them, so I'm just going to throw them in there. Well, that's good. I got to use up 2 containers from my pantry. And then the last thing is the whipped topping. Now remember I said you don't have to add the entire 8 ounce. As I've made this over the years, I've learned, I'm basically the one who eats it. I kind of adjust as needed. So let's go ahead and add that in there, and I might end up adding more, but we'll see. I do have another container. It's unopened. You can see it's a little still frozen, but it's all right. It'll thaw pretty quickly here. You want to make sure you get to the bottom if you did like I did and you put all of that sauce on the bottom. Well, see, that's why I say you want to use a big bowl, because can get a little out of hand. Now, granted, if I didn't have the additional 3 cups of apples, I might have a little extra space in here as well. So basically, you're going to stir this up, and then it's good to eat. Now, I like to incorporate it a little bit more, so let me get my spoon. You want to get that whipped topping kind of over everything, and then just eat it as is. Now, you'll store it in the fridge, obviously, and this will store for a while. I mean, you want to eat it within a week. I try to eat it as soon as possible, within, 4 days or so, just because with that whipped cream, but it's so good. It's like that sweet and salty. It's super good. So this is how you make it. It is phenomenal. Let me get a small spoon. I'm gonna try it for you. I also find that this is really good with like the crunchier apples versus some of the more soft apples. But I just had a random amount of apples in my fridge and I just wanted to use them up. Yeah, that's good. I would say I do not need any more whipped cream, or whipped topping as they call it. It is definitely sweet enough, so I'm gonna leave it as is, and then I'll clean off all of these edges. I'll make myself a bowl, and then I'll put the rest in the fridge. I hope you enjoyed this recipe and you make it for yourself. If you do, put in the comments below if you made it and what you thought of it.